Okay, people, welcome back to part 2 of The Quest Begins, Ireland, Land of the Pharaohs. I just had to stop the first part to get a little drink, use the little boys' room, and this is what I'm drinking today, guys. Some kefir. You should try this stuff, good for the old guts. Drink less fizzy juice and more of this kind of stuff. This is where I'm going. Right, let us begin where we left off. Is it just another coincidence that Independence Day in America is celebrated on the 4th day of the 7th month and Bastille Day in France is celebrated on the 14th day of the 7th month? According to a pamphlet, A Light to the Blind, written around the time of the ritual battle, the first sham fight took place shortly after the ritual battle in the town of Bandon by the precursors of the Orange Order called the Boyne Society in the county of Cork. By referring to it as a sham fight, were they hinting that the battle was something other than it appeared? This pamphlet certainly seemed to consider the whole of the Williamite Wars in Ireland as a sham. There is a feeling throughout his manuscript that the author was telling me my theories were on the right tracks, that indeed there was something more to this event than has ever been revealed. Was there indeed a hidden agenda? A colonel in James's army, Charles O'Kelly, of whom we will hear more later, certainly thought so. Throughout his commentary on the Williamite Wars, he insists and presents compelling evidence to support A Light to the Blind that it was a conspiracy to hand William the victory. What was the title sham fight indicating? Why, for instance, was it not called a reenactment, if that's all there was to it? Would this not have been a more descriptive way to word it? But then, as we have already seen, practically everything about this extraordinary episode in Irish history is confusing if we do not have the appropriate keys. The most important of these keys is the symbolism that was profuse in Brún na Boyne on the day of the battle, which was on the first day of the 7th month. We could go on to paraphrase Ezra, see above, and say that they gathered themselves together as one man to Drogheda, not so bizarre as it seems at first glance. Local historian and official tourist guide Una Sheehan has conducted innovative research in the Boyne area and has come up with some amazing results. One of these is an old street map of Drogheda, which shows striking similarity of this town with a street map of ancient Jerusalem. This will hopefully form the basis of an upcoming book. When the keys are discovered to unlock the meaning of the symbols, seeming contradictions fall away. The Black Institution portrays the sham fight as a personal battle between William and James, something that never happened. Moreover, the meaning of this word sham is a strange one to use in the context of the reenactment of this battle if the intention was to preserve a respectful memory of this great event. Looking at its meanings, the adjective indicates untrue or fake, and the verb forms to mean deceive. Furthermore, the synonyms give us false and bogus, Merriam-Webster Dictionary. The noun is, according to the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language, 4th edition, something false or empty that is purported to be genuine, a spurious imitation. The synchronicity of seemingly disparate events revealing the history of an ancient people who lived near the so-called Newgrange necropolis and the events of the ritual battle at Boyne in 1690 was testing my credulity. It was taking me in direction that only a few short months earlier would have not been possible. The factual aspects of mystery were pushing me towards conclusions that were alien to someone from my background. However, by this time there was no turning back. Like the initiate who could not return once he had embarked on his journey along the path in the mystic yarn, the parabola, the wind at my back propelling me along this path of investigation. The story had taken a life of its own, and the evidence was becoming surprisingly, for me, never mind anyone else, increasingly irrefutable. Coincidence was to strike again, as was becoming the norm throughout my adventure, although it never ceased to amaze me when it happened. This time it was a publication of a book co-authored by Robert Bovell and Graham Hancock called Keeper of Genesis. In their book they confirmed one of my theories that in ancient Egypt the pharaohs had no ritualistically crossed the Nile at least once during their reign, imitating the sun as it traverses the sky across the Milky Way, the starry waterway into their pagan paradise, the Duat. William mirrored this ritual as he crossed the Boyne into the pagan paradise of the Irish, Ewain, or Ewan. Nearby was Douth, whose original Irish form is Dubad, pronounced the same as the ancient Egyptian word Duat, meaning darkness, dark place, or underworld. Another surprising discovery was the similarity in the flowing contours of the Milky Way, the Boyne and Nile rivers. This surely was beyond coincidence. The major pieces of the puzzle were now beginning to fall into place to show an amazing picture of our hidden history. These points will be developed as our story continues. My mind was being opened to the unthinkable, leaving me flabbergasted with the growing certainty of my proposals that what happened at Brú na Boyne in 1690 CE was not a battle as we would understand it. Professor Gillespie demonstrates the confusion about this great event as he seemingly contradicts himself when he said, "This was the first of the great European battles," while at the same time contradicting, stating, "It was a footnote in European history." It is generally suspected, even by traditional historians, there was something out of the ordinary about this intriguing battle. Early research demonstrating that this ancient ritual battle was enacted to initiate Prince William as a Horus king was breathtaking, but for what purpose? Perhaps we will never know all the answers to this because of the complexity of the cryptograms the mystery schools used. However, plausible theories will be forwarded that, if proved, will shatter the history we have been misled about. One of these theories proposes that an aspect of the ritual was linked with the evolution of society and that it was the latest attempt by the mystery schools to introduce tolerance and freedom to release the people of Europe from the shackles of sectarianism and ignorance, which dark forces in London, Anglicanism and Rome Catholicism had forced upon them. To this end, the keys, that is, the myths and symbolism of the Scots-Irish of kingship, was to be transferred to Prince William to legitimise his right to sit on the throne and rule jointly with the rightful inheritor of the British throne, his royal wife, Mary, the House of Stuart. Bovell and Hancock's research demonstrate how the Osiris ritual facilitates the mythical historical transfer of the deeds or keys of the kingdom of Osiris to Horus. Evidence will be offered for the first time in history as to where the authentic kingdom of Osiris is, leading us to even more shocking revelations. The ritual, it will be argued, was a concomitant with the freedom of the individual, since the repository of the so-called Catholic Jacobite teachings is, paradoxically, synonymous with the constitution of the Orange Order, the foundation of both being to preserve freedom of conscience to worship the God you conceive. This statement is supported by the fact that James, in December 1688, was deposed by the Whig politicians for having issued his Declaration for Liberty of Conscience. This document, dated 4th April 1687, conveyed the ideal of religious freedom for all, Catholics, Jews, Presbyterians, Quakers, or whatever. The people were delighted, but they were not in control, and Parliament's ambition for Anglican religious supremacy reigned unchanged. No group suffered more because of the establishment's ambitions than the Irish Protestant nonconformists, especially the Presbyterians. We need to know this for the simple reason that when we think of religious persecution, we tend to not only think of Irish Catholic discrimination, which leads us away from the truth that the elite use religious dichotomy for their own ends. Before William could engage in this ritual and receive the deeds of the Kingdom of Britain, he had to undergo certain initiations. This happened on the banks of the Boyne River and is well documented, but of course hidden in plain sight. The function of these initiations will be explained in their proper place and will demonstrate that his initiations at the Boyne were not the first time William underwent a Masonic-like initiation. When examined closely, history shows that his whole life and that of his family was connected symbolically and literally to the mystery schools. Continuing along this vein of symbology, we discover that Horus fought, defeated, and expelled his uncle from the kingdom, as did William. The evidence was uncovered by my research suggests that the symbolic battle between William and his uncle was an important Scots-Irish myth that can be understood on many levels. By participating in this ritual, William and James were continuing their occult traditions of their houses. They were demonstrating that they knew their family's history and its roots in the ancient land. Why would royalty from all over Europe and soldiers from as far away as the West Indies come to this ancient land to watch a skirmish in passing? No, there had to be something of deeper significance to witness. Knowledge embodied in the ritual battle unlocks the memory and ancestry of the people who had lived in this mythic island in prehistory. The astounding structures at Newgrange are symbolic of their knowledge and confirm that they had a deep knowledge of the 7 sciences, which they lovingly preserved and handed down to subsequent generations. Initiates of the mystery schools added to them as they made breakthroughs in all arts and sciences. Modern initiates had of course the accumulated knowledge of the ancients to draw on. Their knowledge had been developed into systematic teachings that was taught in the mystery schools of Babylon, Egypt and Greece. It follows, if my story is true, that the descendants of Boyne were the founders and students of the Egyptian mystery schools, which have contributed to every area of human knowledge. The survivors of this ancient people, who through a series of transformations became the Scotch-Irish with the genetic name of Britons, British translates from Hebrew as covenant, hence the British are the people of the covenant, Israeli, fled from the area known as the British Isles, following the catastrophe. Dispersing over Europe and the Middle East, they lost their original identity, but never the memory of their ancient homeland, and were reunited as a new nation or race in this, their original homeland. Modern scientific evidence pioneered by Professor Mike Bailey is confirming that cyclic cometary catastrophes actually took place in history and prehistory. This diaspora, instigated by a menace from the sky that threatened their existence, is reenacted in the capital city of Ulster annually by the Orange Order. The path of this extraordinary journey is a difficult one to traverse. Through a lack of interest and neglect, the trail had become overgrown and had to be cleared of the undergrowth of twisted concepts and beliefs to allow a firmer foothold, making the route easier for those daring souls who might follow. Although at times it is a difficult journey, it has the reward of leading us towards an amazing story that has been waiting for generations to be told. Looking back over the distance we have covered so far, we even see that this early stage, important markers. Personally, the most striking of these was my first glimpse of Awen and the undulating hills of Boyne, where the inscrutable Neolithic monuments stand, that left me with a burning desire to explore this amazing landscape. From a retained vantage point, it is now easier to see how a series of simple clues and a number of bizarre coincidences led to some amazing twists of fate. Not least of these coincidences was serendipitous meaning with a unique Irish historian, the enigmatic Joe Downey. Joe set the tone of my story with his amazing revelations about Newgrange and about the pagan land of Awen, an unknown landscape to me until then. He taught me, in our all too short time together, facts about this mysterious kingdom that can only come after years of research and great insight. Integrating his wisdom of this magical place with my knowledge of the Battle of the Boyne, it dawned on me that it had to be more than a coincidence that an important historical religious battle, an event that always intrigued me, had took place in this remarkable setting. By gathering and fitting some of the pieces of the puzzle together, more at times by accident than design, an entirely different picture of the historic event emerged, which also showed the relationship between the battle and the landscape. Because of the colossal sham we accept as history, this incredible story that was still only on the verge of materialising had to work hard to prove itself and to finally remove any inherited bias from the psyche. Initially, the story was too incredulous for me to accept, but by continuing to put the pieces of the puzzle together, my original scepticism was overcome. No longer able to deny the shocking picture that was developing in my mind, a remembered phrase expressed my feelings about what had happened to me. This was the wow, wonder, world of wonder factor. Accepting the assumption that the rudiments of my story were based on facts, it left me confused as to what was to be my next step. Remembering having read that the Greek historian Herodotus, 484 to 430 BCE, wrote, "Success comes not with what is presented, but rather what is done with what is presented." The obvious question then became, what to do with what was being presented to me. As the puzzle pieces became a whole picture, the question answered itself, leaving me with little choice. The journey had to be completed. My mind was now in an almost perpetual state of wonder. The hidden history that my initial fable had inadvertently led me to, like an ancient tomb, exposed to modern scrutiny for the first time, now needed to be unlocked to discover what was within. Was it naive to believe that others would find this strange but intriguing story of an important, albeit local, historical battle interesting enough to realise its profound effects on contemporary Western society? Personal doubts were continually resurfacing in my mind. not about how to present the veracity of the story, but my ability to complete in it in a way that people would find credible. It would, after all, be my first attempt at writing anything, never mind a thesis, as controversial as this, for public scrutiny. However, the thought that the story would generate enough interest to credibly challenge the established history of Western civilization to an extent that it would have to be recognised spurred me on. As a nation, and as individuals here in Ireland and the West, we would be compelled to look at the causes for the reoccurring civil wars that have blighted our country. We would be obligated to re-examine the premises we hold about traditional history, and more importantly, our relationship to each other. This account of history undermines any reason except manipulation for the colloquially named Troubles in Ireland, or for the political and religious dichotomy in our society as a whole. The manipulation of history in Ireland by the elite is the same in any and every Western country. This is the conclusion. This chapter has outlined some of my ideas about the history of the Scots-Irish race and the reinterpretation of it in the light of my unusual research. It is presented as completely at odds with what we have been led to believe. However, the problem was to demonstrate that there was credible evidence for this extraordinary account of history. Initially, this seemed doubtful. Where on earth would the hard evidence come from? After all, it was only a story, a child of my imagination. Inexplicably, something deep inside me knew it was more than that, and the evidence would emerge. No sooner had this conviction expressed itself in my mind than an avalanche of said evidence overwhelmed me, amazingly, even for me, corroborating my bizarre theories, although not entirely limited to it. Supporting evidence came from the research of Emmanuel Voloski, Commons Beaumont, and Ailey Waddell, probably the three most ignored and reviled writers in the field of prehistorical research. Yet they changed so many lives, including this author. My investigations indicated that the cadet, red branch of the Scots-Irish, called the Ulster Scots, should feel as much at home in this island as anyone else. Both these tribes are descended from the ancient inhabitants of a mysterious and ancient island, of which Ireland is a remnant. Facts on which the story is based may destroy many long-held myths. One of these is that the Celts, it is possible the Celts never reached Ireland in any significant numbers, that's another story, produced contemporary Irish society, and that the Ulster Scots, not being Celts as we understand the word, are so-called planters, that is, recent arrivals. Nothing could be further from the truth. We are a single nation who have been, by design or otherwise, divided by the oriflammes of religion and misguided rabid nationalism. My assertion that the Battle of the Boyne can be interpreted as an ancient ritual is only the starting point for a reassessment of Occidental history. The ritual battle unlocks a portal that reveals a radically different view of our Western origins and consequently the beginning of an amazing journey. Evidence appeared which demonstrates that the ritual battle has had lasting effects on Western societies. In this rarefied atmosphere of conspiracy and intrigue, it's not easy to identify the shadowy figures in the background, and absolutely nothing is as it appears. Morpheus, who in Greek mythology is one of the sons of Hynos, the god of sleep, says in the film The Matrix, "Try not to think in terms of right and wrong." Francis Bacon expressed a similar idea when he said, "There is no such thing as good or bad, but it is thinking that makes it so." These sayings should not be taken at face value, but contemplated upon to uncover the proper context. The motto on the British coat of arms may help. Hone soit que mal ye pense, evil to he who evil thinks, may help. To answer the question of why no one has uncovered the story before, facts will be presented that show a dictatorial hierarchy that is so all-powerful it can suppress and manipulate the major episodes in history. It may be difficult to believe that there are such individuals, and are they indeed as powerful as many prominent people in government surprisingly believe? Could the significant mythologized events we are investigating have been suppressed? It seems so, but why? Were the modern branches or tribes of the ancient race kept in conflict to prevent them from discovering their true history? Was our attention diverted while our identity and history were being stolen so we could be controlled? After all, the American War of Independence is an example of what the Scots-Irish were capable of when roused and united. It was surprising for me to discover that there is copious evidence without the manipulation of our society by a parasitical elite, which will be discussed in the next chapter. It is almost impossible to look at any period of history without seeing their odious handiwork. Authors who research the subject find it problematical and coming to terms with the evidence they encounter because it appears so incredible. Master spy J. Edgar Hoover explains why this should be so when he shone a light into the shadows, as he seemed to enjoy doing so on occasions. The individual is handicapped by coming face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists. He was, of course, talking about the communist treat to the United States of America, but this adage could just as easily refer to the manipulation of Western history. In the next chapter, as we attempt to expose the conspiracy, we immediately discover the paradox that there is no need for any so-called conspiracy if what is meant by the conspiracy is world control. The system or matrix itself is what is misconstrued as the conspiracy. However, caution is needed if we are not to jump to conclusions when the word conspiracy crops up. This word is linked in our minds in the disparaging expression conspiracy theory, and this is no accident. This phrase has been used to veil many truths. We're better to hide information the establishment doesn't want to reveal than brand invalid, if unusual, research as conspiracy theory and packaging it along with the more bizarre conspiracies. Herbert Spencer provides an antidote. There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is a proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. The principle is contempt prior to investigation. Strangely, the elite are not inhibited about using conspiracies to fulfill their shadowy plans. The First World War was started on the back of a conspiracy, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand by Serb nationals. It could also be reasoned that the burning of the Reichstag was a conspiracy to ensure Hitler was brought to power, which initiated World War II. Presently, a conspiracy that we're told was hatched in the mountains of Afghanistan, which resulted in what had become known as 9/11, has probably started World War III. Do not fall prey to careful placed traps as we explore some seldom trodden byways of history. We also discover in the next chapter how some authors are cunningly used to unknowingly assist in driving a hidden agenda. This is the reason you are counselled to use your own rational mind and hear, because this story or author is not immune to the same deviousness. Now, let us proceed to examine the global conspiracy, with the added task of trying to understand how an all-pervading illusion that is so monstrous could be maintained and preserved in a society of educated people for so long. The Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around. What do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged, and many of them are so inured, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. Morpheus, the Matrix. So people, this is just the footnotes. I'll slowly scroll down the footnotes if you want to research them. There we go. There's lots of footnotes. So, the next chapter is, I think, the parasitical elite. Chapter 2, the parasitical elite. None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. Anyway, people, I hope you enjoyed that first chapter, and I will see you in chapter 2. Have a great day, people. Take care. Thanks.